So, with that, I'd like to invite a few of our guests to come down here to answer some questions. I tried to just pick people who are coming from diverse places. First, Harris Sherman will be coming down, and where's Yoram? Oh, there you are. There. I couldn't see you. Yoram Kapulnik is the head of the Volcani Institute, our version of the USDA labs. Aliza Inbal from the regulatory side, and Debbie Delmer, she from the political side. Debbie Delmer, who comes from every side and understands what's going on in Israel, and Hillel, who, coming from the academia, is charge of in our department. We're all just going to squeeze in here. Yeah, because we're all at home, right? And what I actually want to do is, and I'm not sure how we're going to do this in terms of, if I give them on what they think this conference and food security means from their perspective for Israel, the question is, where do we go from here? I'll start with Harris, because he'll give us a little bit of an international approach. Then we'll go left and towards the right.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
No, that's just so that they hear you upstairs on the being.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been here for 3 days. 3 days, so I know enough to be dangerous. So forgive me for that. First of all, this has been a great conference, and I have learned an enormous amount. There have been so many outstanding presentations. First of all, I come away from this conference incredibly impressed with what Israel can contribute to the world. There is just an enormous amount going on in this country on all aspects of the food security issue. So whether it's biotechnology or increasing agricultural efficiencies or dealing with political institutions, you've got this incredibly rich history, and in a way you probably have a head start on these issues as it relates to the developing world more than just about any other country in the world. So I think you have a really incredible and unique opportunity to do something significant. I do think that if somebody says, why would you do this? Why should you do this? Well, obviously, the first reason is it's the right thing to do. I think it was Bernie who talked about being your brother's keeper. That is so true, and clearly Israel has this very, very rich tradition in that respect. So that is a very good reason to do this. I think secondly, you have this incredible knowledge base that gives you the head start I just was referring to. I do think this is, in these very trying times, in terms of international relationships, this is a great way to extend a hand to other countries, to build goodwill, trust. So I would, think that is an additional reason. And then, of course, there's all kinds of synergistic spin-off effects and opportunities and benefits that come from this, economically and otherwise, which would, I think, lead you to actively pursue this. I should say that, in terms of how you do this, I think one way clearly is to work with your trading partners, such as the United States, where together you can open doors and provide these skills and opportunities and knowledge that otherwise may be very difficult to do. And so I think Israel really should reach out to its diplomatic and trading partners and see how you can do more in this regard. And by the way, these are my own personal thoughts. I haven't checked with the State Department or USAID or whoever about. It's all recorded. I will promptly be removed when I get home. But anyway, I think that's really important. And I think secondly, it's critically important to reach out to the NGO community, to reach out to the foundation community. We heard yesterday about very good work that's being done in Africa, but these are communities that you have a logical partnership relationship with, and I would really try to explore that to the maximum extent. And I think thirdly, and I say this both on behalf of the United States and your country, I hope our governments will be willing to put some more resources into this. These are very tough budgetary times, but the issues we've been struggling with for the last 2 days are the most important issues on the planet, and it does take resources. And I hope our governments will jointly consider how we can allocate more to make these good things happen. So those are a few initial thoughts.
We started this meeting, we hadn't really realized, and so we actually didn't do a call to speakers from all over. We just meet people that come from other universities. But I hope that the next time we have a meeting like this, it will be open more.
It's a good apology here. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm coming from the ARO, which is Agricultural Research Organization. This is actually the research arm of the Ministry of Agriculture. And actually, food security for us in Israel is not a new terminology. You have to realize that a generation and a half here in Israel, food security was a necessity of life. We start with a kind of a drawback, right? We don't have enough land in the country, and I'm sorry that I cannot present some data, but you can take my word for that. We don't have water in the country, and this today is an example, okay? And we don't have enough labor. And those are three items that if you don't have them in hand or you don't have them available, you cannot really secure the food for your nation. So in a way, we actually passed maybe not such, and I was listening to the figures and numbers and the presentation for the future, and it looks like that we have a little bit more experience, but I'm not feeling confident that we have the answer in our. And yes, we have some devices that can do better irrigation. You can use it more effectively, efficiently, and we can probably share the know-how. And I think that some companies in Israel are doing very well. As a matter of fact, none of the Israeli companies are Israelis company by names, because all of them actually were purchased by the big guys. And we don't have them anymore. So we need to start actually from the beginning. So one thing which is very important, and it came through the whole presentation, is the question of timing. Everyone is saying that we need to have new varieties that will be adapted better to the environment, that they will yield, higher quality, vitamins, and so on. However, from the other side, we can see that it takes years. Not only that, but we learned today that after you have your new variety, then it takes another couple of years before it would be adapted well to the market. So the future is here. And I'm not sure that we have in hand good answers. So one thing I think that I can add in is the issue of teaming. The situation that we as a scientist, also as a research group, are aiming towards a specific goal. Probably this is a method of science of the past. We probably will need to open our lab door. We will need to deal somehow with the IP of our institution, because every institute is protecting its own IP, patent. If we really need to help the people out there. So teaming we have to team, of course, in Israel, and I think that from our small experience, teaming between scientists and the expansion specialists and the farmers actually gave us the advantage over the years. The distance between the test tube to the dripper in the field or the farmer who is eager to absorb the technology was very short. And this was an advantage that we use it very, I think this is for our fortune. Yes, I know other systems, even in the US. This is something that I think, so those teaming of different agencies, as well as scientists in the scientific world, I think that will help us to do better. The other issue, the last one, is the World Consortia. And it's really related to the teaming, but here we are talking about World Consortia that will plan ahead of time the objective and will try to collect resources to fuel that effort, and not only doing it by, in our ministry we don't have enough money. By the way, the OECD value is the average is 2.5% of GNP, and in Israel it's about 0.8%. And I know it very well because this is my way to bargain for more funds. So we can't do it internally in the country anymore. We have to team together, big consortia with other countries, other nations, and to put together some. And I really agree. Well, United States and Israel, it's like the joke with the elephant and the mouse, right? But I think that together we can work out things very effectively, and we can put some solution forward in the issue of food security. Just to conclude, I would like to let you know that the Minister of Agriculture, Mrs. Orit Noked, announced that she is setting a special it's a national committee to evaluate this issue and to put some solution out there. And this is something which is, you have to admit, for the Israeli government, it's something new. They are thinking about 2050. Yes, so we'll share the same sale, okay? Okay, thank you very much.
Well, one of the things I'd like to draw on is having lived here for 10 years. And if there's one thing I absolutely love about Israelis is that they have a can-do attitude and a come on, cut the bullshit way of looking at the world. And I think the whole world of development is full of a lot of people with great heart, but sometimes not practical solutions. And I think that characteristics of Israeli culture are such that it positions you in a very good way to make your own unique contribution to the development community. And for example, we've heard over the last couple of days, and you read over and over, we have to double yields of crops by 2050. Monsanto pledges they will double the yield of crops just by stacking up their new traits. And having lived with an Israeli for 10 years who dealt with water issues, I asked the Monsanto person who claimed this is possible, biomass is directly proportional to the amount of water transpired through the plant. And you can nibble around the edges of that by manipulating water use efficiency a little bit here or there. But you can't get away from the fact that biomass is directly proportional to the amount of water that the plant uses. So you've got to be realistic. And this comes from the Israeli experience in water, from all of its aspects, from the guys that at the Water Authority all the way down to the molecular people, I think. So if there's one area of the world you can make a huge contribution, it is at all levels, all the way from the desalinization experts up to you guys here in the universities. It's to water. And I just think that in you've already been leaders in irrigation technology, and you can go back 3,000 years. When did the Nabateans come here? The Nabateans did agriculture on 3 inches of water a year by watershed management, simple watershed management. You'd be amazed that those technologies are still applicable today in many parts of Africa, for example. So you can draw, I think ICRISAT is doing a watershed management. I don't see any collaborations with Israel. IMI, the International Water Management Institute in it's one of the CG centers based in Sri Lanka. I don't know where it stands with Israel today on any collaborations with those kind of people. So that's an area that you can really make unbelievable contributions. I think the areas of cash crops, there's a lot of pull now to move from total subsistence agriculture for the poor, but to become more economically based, to make agriculture a business, as someone said here. And then that really is very, very important. If you're a smallholder, I mean, if you're growing, there's still people in the development world who try to promote a development agenda, believing that a woman with several children who is the farmer of the household can do well if we only train her how on a half of a hectare of land growing maize, and she'll do well. There's still people that promote that agenda. It will only just get her better maize varieties. I'm sorry, this is asking more of that woman than she can do. But if you tell her on her half hectare of land she can grow a high cash value crop and she can get it to market, and how you can get her to do that, then she can raise her family maybe. So Israel's great at this, right? You're small. You do horticulture. You do marketing. You are very, very clever at these things. So creating viable models for small-scale agriculture that is economically feasible, not the dream of getting that woman to grow maize. It drives me crazy when I hear people promote that kind of thing. So you're ideal at that. We haven't said anything about livestock. I know that you have some of the highest milk production in the world. You've set world records. And you have, through your breeding programs, done heat tolerance introgression into your elite lines. For climate change, for Africa, for all of the equatorial regions of the world, if you would work with the International Livestock Research Institute in Nairobi, that's the center of that, I really think there'd be tremendous payback at Heifer International. You can get involved with a lot of people on that kind of thing. So I won't take, and the other, there's a lot more, but I'm not going to take any more time. How to move forward, I would say 2 things. You need to find your focus, you that want to do this. Who's going to lead your effort? And identify 10 key scientists in Israel that are just outstanding and unique to the properties of what Israel has to give in water, in dairy, and in molecular breeding, and whatever you are really, really good at. Identify 10 scientists and find a way to help fund a collaboration with the right people in the developing world around those people. And find your partners. Institutes of the CGIR. Becca, talk to Seganet. There are really good partners out there. So find your vision, find your leaders, find your own scientists, and find partners for them. And I think the money will come. The money will come if you have that vision.
I wonder if there's any way to just hang this over here. I'm the head of the International Development Program at Tel Aviv University's School of Governance and Policy. So I'm going to answer the question of what I think food security in Israel means in terms of Israel's policy and strategic interests. And for me, what food security means is it means opportunity. It means diplomatic opportunity, it means economic opportunity, and it means moral opportunity. What we've done in Israel over the past 60 years on the issue of food security and water is only short of miraculous. However, since the 1970s, we've done very little to share that knowledge with the countries that need it most. You know, in the first 25 years of Israel's existence, Israel had more agricultural experts in Africa per capita than any country in the world, which led the New York Times in 1961 to talk about Israel as being the most welcome strangers in Africa. Today, in contrast, Israel has one of the smallest aid programs in the world. Now, why does this matter for us politically? In the 21st century, there is no more important topic on the international agenda than that of international development. And in international development, there is no more fundamental area than that of food security. International aid has become the sine qua non of good citizenship in the community of nations. If Israel hopes to build bridges with the outside world, we have to begin to contribute more. And Israel can leverage its expertise in agriculture and in water to build a positive agenda with the UN agencies and with other development bodies. And we can that way become a very significant force for good in the world. So if at the moment Israelis complain about being isolated, about as if we're on a diplomatic island, we don't need to be an island. We can be an oasis. We can be a place where people who are hungry and thirsty come to learn about dealing with problems of hunger and thirst. And I'm not even only speaking just of charity, I'm also speaking of economics. The continents with the greatest land degradation problems and water scarcity problems are also the continents with the highest economic growth rates in the world at the moment. Now, of course, that's Asia, but it's also Africa. Over the past decade, growth rates in Africa have far, far outstripped those of the United States and of Europe. And so Israeli agricultural and water companies tend to gain economically a lot by developing technological solutions to the problems of Africa. And finally, food security is a moral opportunity. For those of you who don't know the statistics, every 5 seconds a child dies in the world from hunger. Now, whenever I tell people I work here in international development, the common answer I get from a lot of Israelis is Anieh HaKodmin, which is a rabbinic statement which says you should help the poor of your city first. But actually in the Bible there's also another principle, and that principle is Lo ta'amod al damoecha, which means that when you should not stand by when people are dying. Now, 16,000 children die of hunger every day in the world, and thank God none of them are in Israel. And so each and every one of us here of the Israeli scientific and policy community have the tremendous opportunity to save lives by investing more in what Israel does best, which is innovation, in one of the fields that we do it best, in agriculture, for the countries that need it most. Now, to be sure, we can't do it alone, and there are no solutions that can be developed for the developing world which don't involve active cooperation with the developing world, with scientists and with communities. But we can save lives together if we choose to, and that's the greatest opportunity of all. And so I want to end with a brief quote from Prime Minister, our first Prime Minister, Ben Gurion, speaking in 1961. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it's one that I think is no less relevant for us as Israelis today than it was when it was spoken 50 years ago. What he said was this: the changes we have produced in the economic, social, and cultural structures of our ingathered people are those that most Asian and African nations want. From us, perhaps more than any others, they can learn how feasible such changes are. And to ensure that they derive the utmost benefit, we must find room for more of their youth in our institutions of higher learning and facilitate practical training in our agricultural, cooperative, and educational undertakings. At the same time, we should send them as many of our experts as we can spare. They must feel that we are performing a pioneer mission, not just a job for hire. It should be manifest in an attitude of humility and fraternity, with neither arrogance nor self-depreciation towards the people amongst whom they work, and with an all-out effort to pass on the best of our knowledge and experience. That is our opportunity, and that is our challenge.
First, I would like to say that this was a great learning experience for me these past 2 days. And I'll try to summarize some of the important things I find in this conference. And in terms of learning, to me, was learning that the issue of food security can be divided into global, international factors, into regional factors. Some of the issues are clearly global, that is international law, international regulation of commerce, collections of germplasm that can be shared by others, and there are more. I'm not going to try to number all of them. But we also heard, especially from Africa and also from Israel, that some of the problems are clearly regional. For example, water. Regional means beyond borders, but clearly no one else can solve the problems of water here in Israel and with the Arab countries or the Palestinians except for us. So this is a clear regional problem. In Africa, we heard about a rich country buying the grain of the neighbor poor country and depriving the people there from the grain. So these are local or regional issues that need to be dealt at the regional level. So the way I see the whole issue is that for the future, there is need not only in this area but in other parts of the world for strong regional leadership that goes beyond borders also, hopefully, if it's possible, that also is supported by their own governments in the region that interacts with international institutes or different agencies on a regular basis. Now, and when we speak about regional leadership in terms of food security, then we go and ask ourselves what Israel can offer to the world after, first of all, solving the problems here. So, and then we have to think about all the factors involved. So some of the factors that are a problem are more tangible, like land, water. You can measure them. We saw all the numbers of water going up, down, environment. And some are more difficult to measure. This is culture, religion, politics. But these are factors that are very important in matters of food security. So Israel, I think, can concentrate on what it's good in, and it was already mentioned also by Debbie, dealing with water problems and issues of irrigation and studying arid land agriculture, desert agriculture. And also Israel, I think, used to be good and could be good in combining different disciplines of technology and training. And I think if we have a strong leadership here of food security, we can expand to other Mediterranean countries. And this is not just a wishful thinking, because we have different programs here that we benefit from the EU programs of Mediterranean countries. For example, we have now a collaboration with the Mediterranean countries on issues of desert forest or forest growing on marginal lands and marginal water for biomass production. So these are issues that could be expanded in this area. And I think from what I've seen also from the talks about Africa, what I have in mind from the talks I heard about is that when you see the predictions in the future of all over the world, all the red spots which indicate danger or risks, most of them you can see in Africa. And we are very close to these African countries. So a strong leadership here and success in dealing with the problem of food security can be expanded to our neighbors, African countries. They are not far away, by providing training and solving problems that we have together with them. So my wishful thinking is that our institute, government, universities will understand that this is an important issue and will support the establishment of a strong leadership on food security here.
I got one or two questions during the breaks, then we'll open it up for a few others. The first question, I think maybe Debbie would be the best person to answer this one, which was, so how do we take such a multidisciplinary, international problem, and we've all identified the problems, but then actually put it into action? And so with your experience, with an agency that's trying to do that,
I don't know. Maybe it's coming back. You're talking about we, the group that wants to do this, or how does anybody? Well, I can tell you that one of the things I have enjoyed most in the transition from being an academic at Davis to doing what I've done ever since is listening to talks from people like Phil Pardee or something that, you know, I always thought economists just were pains that got in our way. And I came to develop tremendous respect through the kind of things development does force you to think about more than your own area. It forces you to think big because your own little solution to the germination of a seed isn't going to go very far if you don't collaborate all the way through the value chain for that seed. And so, you know, how do you do it? It'll happen if you're smart. It'll happen only if you don't stay within your little island of academia, because your impact won't be there if you just stay and publish a paper on it. You've got to reach out, have meetings like this, and bringing the legal people, the economists. You yourselves, I think, already see how amazing it is to think about agriculture with different colleagues right on your own campus than it was, how much more challenging and fun it is than it is just to think about, get up every morning, think about your one problem in Arabidopsis. So.
Let's open it up for questions. You want to aim it at someone?
General comment that has been overlooked on the meeting before day.
What is it?
We haven't looked our land concern, our land view about what's going on in the sea as a potential also source for food has been overlooked. Yeah, but anyway, but you were talking about food. Yeah, well, those the relationship also with the sea is an element to take into consideration, and as well the rangelands, including that into the food security about dairy, but also rangelands are part of the issue of food security, and people would like to consume more proteins coming from stocks, from animal stocks, and definitely this to that point will add additional element for concern on thinking on innovative thinking on how to do that and all the issues around.
Respond to that?
First of all, I'd like to compliment the Manna Foundation for having this workshop. During the last year, I was invited to 5 different workshops as a speaker on fuel security, energy security, and I got up and said, hey guys, this isn't the problem is food security. And so I'm glad to see that finally people are waking up that food security is much more important than energy security. And to address what Debbie was talking about, in food security, 2 heads are better than 1. Doesn't matter if they're heads of cabbage or it's their heads of people thinking about the problem. And I think if you're thinking about the next stage of this, it would be very important to bring a series of people deeply involved in production agriculture. That is, entomologists, pathologists, weed scientists, agronomists, and others from the developing world to say what the real problems are in their countries. I think you'll find that there are a lot of open minds that would like to collaborate. I don't think you can do it so much on an institutional basis as stimulating the individual scientists to say, hey, these guys have a real problem. I've been dealing in problems for years that I can maybe increase yields 4%. They have a problem, I can increase yields 400%. That makes a big difference, and that will really stimulate a lot of people to collaborate and start these collaborations. Where the funds will come from, that's a good question later. But somehow or other they come, from at least my own experience. but I think it's very important to really know what the real local issues are. We need the economists to say how important they really are, too. Because you'll see that there are national programs dealing with little things that are of minor importance, where major things are ignored. And this is another issue. But I agree totally with Debbie that we need these collaborations, and there are a lot of people here who can do it. But I think you really have to stimulate their minds to get involved.
I would actually like to turn that into a question. For Yoram. So, from the Ministry of Agriculture and from the Volcani Institute, of course, how much of the research or the development is food security oriented, or is it market oriented, or is there no difference between the two?
Okay. There is no much border between those two questions. Food security is a very important issue. But you have to realize, and please bear with me with this example, now, even in Israel, people are protesting because of high prices of the cottage cheese or others. So what the government does, very quickly, is reducing the taxes for cheese that will be imported to the country from outside. But the next step will be that those farms that are making living out of dairy farm, they will wipe out. So we are talking about food security. So those two questions, Danny, that you raised, actually they are bound together. So we have to secure it in many angles, not only that. Now, of course, we like to think that, the farmers are supplying only our own demands, but the big money is out there, overseas. So there is another alternative. You have to export it. In order to export it, you have to develop all the know-how. So it's another thing that we actually, for over the years, many years, we to send fresh fruits or fresh herbs to Europe, it was a great idea. This exact market niche was this year $200 million annually. But next year, even not half of that. And the reason is that until recently, those herbs enjoy a night fly to the market. The export was through aviation, through airplane. But now, because of the price of the energy, you cannot anymore export it to Europe the same way, so you are losing your market, actually. Because from now on, those fresh herbs will need to stay 3 weeks on the trip to get to the market. So you can see that import, export, in, out, everything is mixed together. So you cannot really concentrate on one thing. You have to see the whole puzzle and make the decision. And yes, I just gave an example during our early this week we met together that usually we used to consume our mint, the herb in our tea. Usually it was in the garden or in the balcony. You took a fresh one and you consume it. If you try to keep it in your refrigerator the next morning, you don't really want to use it anymore. But now we have a technology that you open the box after 3 weeks, and the mint will be as fresh as it was cut this morning in the farm. So, yes, the problem is actually pushing us to the point that we have to develop new things. But that's what I'm saying. Everything is bound together. We didn't do it only for the physiology of the plant. This is a necessity of some farmers. Otherwise, they will not be there for tomorrow.
Actually, I think the answer of Yoram to what?
No. He just said who you are.
Oh, I'm Avi Levi from the Weizmann Institute. So I think the answer of Yoram was not really an answer to Jonathan's comment, and I think it's symptomatic of the problem. you're talking about the market, and I think Jonathan was asking about our role beyond that. And I think it's very important, maybe for us scientists who are working in public institutions, to distinguish between what industry does, what's market interested in, and what we want to do for global problems, if we want to contribute anything like we've just heard. And I think we need to redefine these goals, and I don't think, at least in Israel, that we have a vision for that at all. I mean, our plant research is very much market-oriented. Is it good for the business? But we almost have nothing which relates to the question of addressing global problems. I never saw a call for a proposal which really would care about that. So that's one point where maybe we need to do some lobbying to our government representative. And the other thing is at the comment that maybe also we need to do some rethinking, because the industry, if it's Monsanto or Syngenta or any, in many respects, much more advanced than scientists are in their labs, in the ability to do genomics, to do high throughput works, to do some of the modern biology. It's a little bit like in the computer world, where industry, I mean, academy was ahead of them, and then it reversed. Now the industry is advanced compared to academy. So I think we have to maybe redefine priorities for public research in general.
Other questions?
Came from what Yoram said too. We haven't talked at all about post-harvest, really, deterioration. Somebody did mention the huge losses, but this is where you guys are geniuses at. And you'll get better at doing it over 12 days. Well, that'll only help Africans, because it takes them 12 days to get to market. So if you figure out your meat problem, that's going to be even more relevant for Africa. How to get it to market over, not in an airplane.
I'd like to make a few comments. You see, I'm wearing many hats because for the last more than 4 decades, I'm both in the academia full-time and both in business full-time and both in NGOs full-time. So I can see things from many different angles. And I think one point is really very important here. Management. The whole process is not being managed. And the management is a very important thing. Management should set priorities and should analyze data in order to understand what the needs are. And that's why you need, I don't expect really the government to manage things, because they're very, very bad at it and they have all kinds of vested interests. And really what you expect is to have a better, much stronger tie with business people. That's it. The business community can guide and and are motivated by profits, and therefore they will find they'll find the financing, and they will do things. The business sector is very important. The trouble is that the business sector in Israel is first of all very small. Second, it suffers from the government intervention to a tremendous degree, and they find it more useful to spend the time at the government's offices rather than to do the business, because it's more profitable. And but really the case is there. Secondly, the business people in Israel haven't gone through the transformation which is needed, because they don't realize where the problems are. Business people like to have problems because problems show needs. I don't know, you all saw me under the elephant, being massaged by that elephant. It really shows my attitude toward risk and toward problems. I welcome risk. Imagine the case that the world would have no problems and no risks. It would be, you'll commit suicide. I would commit suicide. It's boring. It's boring. It's only when you have problems and when you face risks that you have challenges, that you find things to do, you find new points, you find your strengths. If everything is tranquil, there is no development. The third point is that management should be motivated, and they should understand these issues. And that's why I emphasize in my presentation the need for transformation. They have to change the way of thinking. It's not difficult to do that. They suddenly have to see the fly. Right now, most people, the public actually in Israel at large, understands the environmental issues, understand the social issues, understand the economic issues, and they call for social justice. They demonstrate in the streets because we've reached a very undesirable point in Israel right now. Not only in Israel. Israel is leading the world in that sense. I'm not talking about all these revolutions in the Arab world, which are different. But Israel is one of the first OECD countries that started the protest, the protesting and demonstrating. And it's very important. But we have to, the people, the simple person in the street understand the problems, but the management don't see the problems yet, and they should be transformed. So I suggest that people should go and learn, and have that all directors should be guided to take a course about the environmental issues. And also I invite all the people in Tel Aviv University and the academia in general to take these courses, because we are teaching very obsolete stuff. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm going to try to be brief, but I have to say, Professor Kana, that I partly agree with you and I largely disagree with you. And I'm sorry with all, but I do agree that when you're talking about innovation, the private sector is enormously important, because when you're talking not about basic science but about innovating products, nobody does it like the private sector does. The example I always give is Internet was created by the Ministry of Defense in the United States of America. If it had stayed in the Ministry of Defense and had not made it into the private sector, we wouldn't be anywhere where we are, as we are today in the information society. But to say that the private sector understands the needs in developing countries, if that's what we're speaking about, rather than but in terms of food security, fortunately, the food security problem in Israel is a lot smaller than the food security problem in Africa. And you cannot say that the people on the street here, or the private sector here, or even the government here understands needs in those countries. And the reason that you need, this is, but in terms of if the real problem we're addressing is a problem of food security not only in Israel but globally, then we need the private sector, but we also need the government to be doing the sort of things to support the private sector and to support the research sector to understand what needs are, to build the sort of collaboration with researchers in developing countries, and to put us in the right direction. At the moment, and I'll close with this because I know we have very little time. At the moment, the Israeli government is seriously considering substantially raising our aid budget for the first time in about 40 years. Now, the question is where is that money going to go to? And one of the things that we've been advising in our program is that it is essential that that money go not only to sending bags of rice during crises, but more importantly to knowledge creation, and knowledge creation in cooperation with the developing world and with the people who are supposed to benefit from that knowledge. And so I do feel that the government has a leading role to play in this, and they have the capacity to do it, and our responsibility as academics is to try to pull the government in that direction.
I think that I think first of all that we can continue the discussion outside. Also importantly, in terms of food security, the food's going to go away. So it's waiting outside for us, and because it's Thursday, they have to close the building a little bit earlier. So first, I'd like to thank the panel for just giving us a little bit of a different perspective, and I just want to thank everyone for again coming for this meeting, because I think in my mind where this has to go is that if we stop here, that this was a nice meeting, it was a good intellectual exercise, then we've defeated the purpose. I think what we've seen from this, both within Tel Aviv University and within Israel in all is that the interdisciplinary complexity of the question of food security, and the fact that Johnny, you said that even though you work in a journal on food security, but that you're invited to talk about energy security, shows that we haven't been successful in putting the term on the public agenda. And I think the role of the universities, not only Tel Aviv University, and I hope if at Tel Aviv that we do succeed in building some type of center now here on food security that unites both the west side and the east side of the campuses, that could provide the initiative and the inertia to work together with the Volcani Institute, with the government, together with our partners here at Tel Aviv University to start putting this on the agenda. And so I hope that I can welcome you all back to a second meeting, but this time it would be actually a meeting that, like with posters, an academic meeting on food security that we could all talk in different types of fields. So thank you very much for attending. And I really want to thank our guests for coming and everyone who helped in the meeting. Thank you.